Hey there, everybody. I am Parks, and this is Phreak. And I'm joined by Phreak today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for doing this.
I want to talk to you about casting in the quarantine, working in the quarantine, improving, being hype, getting energy. I'm trying to do that right now. But you
Doing great.
thank you. You have brought an incredible energy, I think, this split that otherwise is somewhat lacking. I just think it's so hard when we don't have the fans, we don't have the crowd, we don't get to hear the big countdowns at the beginning of the game. We don't get to see the players. But I think you make up for a lot of that. So I just want to kind of talk about it a little bit.
Sure.
I think people, I've seen it on Twitter, especially recently as the weeks go on, kind of calling you out. Like, this is your best split in so long. Is that because this is just where you started, casting from the basement?
Yeah, at least it's actually mine this time,
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's half accurate, where I'm casting from. It's great. I don't know. It's weird because I don't feel like I'm doing anything all that different, in the back of my mind. I'm aware some of the outputs are different, right? I'm aware people are clearly picking up on stuff differently. And I don't know if that's somehow the quarantine's affecting viewership, like the viewers, and they're like, everything sucks, but Phreak's still decent. I'm not saying it is that or whatever. I'm aware there's different outputs. When I've done maybe 3 or 4 games where I've had a really heavy criticism on a team for making a mistake. I'm like, okay, that's new, but I think it's defensible. I think it's an okay thing to do. I'm happy with it. So okay, that part's new, but it's I don't love League of Legends any really more or less than over the last several years. I don't know. It's interesting. I'm not sure why it's coming across better. I will say, sure, maybe I am actually doing better, and we'll say it's that. But I'm not sure why that's true. Yeah, maybe it's because I'm at home. It's weird because I don't think it ever comes through on air, and I don't think it ever actually is affecting me. But there's that tinge of self-consciousness that well, I have neighbors. People are vaguely around me that could theoretically hear me, and that's kind of weird. I like having, I don't keep my windows open when I'm casting, but a lot of times during the day I like having a windows open. That means if I'm streaming or anything else and I'm yelling, it's people just walking down the street are just gonna hear some random dude yelling at words they don't understand. But the self-conscious doesn't come through because once we're on air and told to go, I don't think about that anymore. It's just the games. I agree with you that an audience is actually really impactful. That will amp me up a lot. The only times I ever get nervous when casting are things like Worlds, where I'm oh, there's a lot of people watching and a lot of people out there, and then it'll go away once we're on air because I'm just focused on the games again. But yeah, I don't feel nervous at all doing it from home because it's just I've done this a million times anyway. But yeah, for whatever reason, it's going better, and that's great. I love that people are enjoying the casts.
Yeah. I love that as well. How do you find the energy? I think for me personally, I wake up and roll over and here I am at work.
Sure.
How do you, continue finding the energy without the audience and the other things that we're talking about?
Sure. What's nice is, I still 11 years in, still really love League of Legends, and that's the biggest thing for sure, right? Is this game is still phenomenal to me, and I still love it and all that. I will say, yeah, getting an 8:55 call time and rolling out of bed at 8:50 to then go, turn on the laptop and do tech check, and then okay, I've got 30 minutes, cool. Now I'll go shower. Okay, now I'll come back for rehearsal. All right, it's 9:30. I'm still sleepy, but then the games are at 12:30 or so, right? So I'll either nap afterwards or whatever, but I'll just be able to I'll eat lunch, then I'll just be in the mind state. And it's the same thing. It's just well, it's LCS. Sure, it's from home, sure, it's whatever, but it's also the same thing I've been doing since 2013, where it's okay, the lights go on, the camera goes on, I've got those right there. And it's okay, it's LCS, we're going. I can't look to my left and literally see a Zale. I will still point to him and say, "Are you ready?" And then he'll not say "let's go," and that's okay. Forgive him for that one. But he's in Discord, so I've got his voice in my headphones. We've got a program feed up there on this monitor, full screen. So a lot of the pieces are exactly the same, where I'm still kind of here doing it. It's almost even more comfortable because the monitor gets to be at like proper ergonomic eye level instead of like this hunched down looking at 45 degrees the whole time trying to cast, or standing and doing it this way and it's even worse. Like there's like small amounts of ergonomic, it's actually better. That said, yelling is worse when sitting than when standing, and I usually stand casting LCS in the studio. I've not went and bought a standing desk for my home setup. But at the end of the day, I don't know. I'm rambling on about like the way the setup is. It's still LCS, and I still really love it. Right? The teams are exciting. It's interesting as well because I'll go on another tangent here and just give long answers, and you can cut them down as you need, or not, and it'll just be a ramble fest. Very often it is easier to be hyped for exciting games than non-exciting games, right? Like the like some of my best calls are like G2 winning at MSI, which was like, that's hype. Europe won something for the first time since 2011. That must feel really good to win something. Europe, share the wealth. please. You know, I want my turn. But regardless, but yeah, it's like really easy to get excited for, you know, like Cloud9 TSM or Cloud9 Team Liquid. Like that's going to be a hype match. They're tied in the standings right now. At least in that time of recording, we'll see what happens by the time people watch this. Yeah. But currently they're 9-2 in my world. In the past, but at the same time, like some of my calls that people really enjoyed were like CLG Dignitas, where it's like people are screwing up. Yeah. And it's like, well, as long as something to latch onto, like I'm excited for the games regardless. Like I will yell for the team fights. I will find a player to rally behind. I will try to make sure it's the right player to rally behind. Like I don't want to sit there talking about Viper's Riven for, 16 minutes when he's doing nothing. But I was like, no. We're going to set context and champ select. His mid-game team fights will be good. And then he ended the game like 5-0 and 8 deathless, right? It's just like, well, it turns out, yeah, I picked pretty well and he did good things. Good job, Viper. But just in general, it's like, look, I'm excited for the games, excited for the players. I will, truthfully, honestly, in my mind, find things to be excited about and then champion those players. If I'm not excited about them, I won't ramble on about them, but I will find players that I care about. I will find plays that I care about, and I will talk about them. And yeah, I'll be excited because I am excited.
Mm-hmm. I think the last time, and it's actually funny, and I just thought about this, I interviewed Jat at the end of Spring Split, and I told Jat I thought that he, coming back, he'd learn things or whatever and kind of change his style some. After spending time on the balance team, I was like, your Spring Split is so good. Like, I'm really enjoying your cast. And then he left to
Can't
go
wait
coach.
To see you in summer.
So, I just realized, please don't leave. I don't want to, like, be the one making people leave the casting. But,
yeah.
Anyway, I do think that the criticism that you've brought has been very refreshing, personally. Yeah. As someone who is... I'm not an analyst. I'm actually not very smart, but I try and think about the game critically. and so when I see the criticism, I'm like, yes, this is what I'm thinking. So I love that.
Yeah.
Why did you start doing that? Because I think that's something that's a little bit more new.
Right. I'm glad I'm doing it. And I really, really want to make sure I'm not overdoing it. Like, I don't want like the guy who craps an NA to be my thing. Like I really, really don't want that to be the brand that people think of me. And right now it's not, which is good, right? And I'm doing like 1 or 2 a week, and it's not, good thing the games are 40 minutes long in some cases because there's more things to pad, it with. I think for the last couple of years, the driving force I've tried to put into casting, and I've done a decent job, but I could always do better, is being as honest as possible, and in some ways as brutally honest as possible. It's like, I don't want to hype up a player who's not worth hyping. I want to say a decision's bad when it's bad. I want to say a thing is exciting when it's exciting. Because I think fake hype is bad. If everything's hype, nothing's hype. If everything's important, nothing's important. Like, you literally must prioritize or nothing matters. And so, yes, I need to be honest about what I'm talking about, honest with my inflection, honest with my enthusiasm, whatever. What's nice is I just legitimately love LCS all the time. And so I'm honest by being excited about LCS, and that's reasonable. And no one's like, Phreak's fake hype, he actually hates NA. That's not true. So that's good. But yeah, as far as criticizing, I think it's something that we really could have done more of, like as a team overall, and as all broadcasts worldwide, like a decent amount. Now, you want to be careful. Like, you do not want the overriding sentiment of your, like, either you as a caster or you as a region to be our team suck. Like, that's not good. People are going to tune out because of that. So So even in a world where you really believed every team was bad, it would be bad broadcasting to say every team sucks, because you just lose viewership, and that's just like, why would you shoot yourself in the foot?
Yeah.
So in a world where all of NA sucked, and I don't believe that's true, in a world where all of NA sucked, at some point we probably as a broadcast team should lie about it. Like I think that would actually be the correct thing to do, if that ever became the case. That said, I don't think that's true. Again, I don't think that's true. But yeah, it's like, look, if a team is bad for 20 minutes, I don't want to sit there and be like, they missed this, they missed that, they missed, like, it's just not exciting. It's not fun. Look, you are in an entertainment sport, and only so many people want to watch a horror movie, you know, where it's just like, well, everything's bad the whole time and everyone's dying. And so it's like, look, the game can be exciting whether or not the level of play is always super duper high. But when something is a play bad enough that I could have shot called it better, and like I know I could have shot called it better, that's when I will bring it up. Be like, dog, I'm currently plat 4 in solo queue. Maybe I'm really like more like a plat 2 player, but I'm currently plat 4. If I know better, you have absolutely screwed up. And it's like, you know, when you are 4v2 in Elder Dragon spawns, I know to go take Elder Dragon. You know, when your inhibs are all down and they have summoner TP, like I know you need to get rid of the wards and make sure you can hold your base alive, or not push mid as they, you know, like. So it's when things are so catastrophically bad that it's like, look, this is actually easy to get right, I will bring it up. When it's like contentious, like, oh, you should have flashed the hook, I'm not gonna flame you for not flashing a hook. Like, yeah, you probably should have flashed that, and like we can call it out, but I'm not going to rant for 30 seconds in the post game about not flashing a skill shot. Like that's different, right? So yeah, I think some of it is, look, it's so obvious that I am preaching to the choir because everyone gets it. It's something that people can also understand. To you're saying, like, even if you don't think you're a very good player, you're like, wait, I saw that looks stupid to me too. And it's not just like, oh, mechanical misplay, we didn't dodge correctly, which is at least a little aqueous, and you know, there's mind games there at the very least. So yeah, when I can really catch on to it and it's a really, really bonehead play, yeah, I'll pick up on that one. You know, not banning Riven against Viper and banning Kennen instead. Like, come on, like really? So it's the things that are obvious I'll be happy to call out. When teams stop making really obvious mistakes, I won't have that easy fodder anymore. And that's okay. Like if there's no longer any obvious mistakes, that's fine. I'm not using that as a crutch to like be liked as a community, is call it what we're all thinking. But if it's really obvious, I will lay into you, because I think it's fair to do so. Yeah.
No, I agree. And I appreciate it. What do you think about the notion of like a caster bias? Because I mean, this is something that fans talk about any caster at any given time. And this, I don't actually see it, especially if, you know, if it's an obvious thing, you're just being honest. But what do you make of caster bias in general? About
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and I'm glad I get to talk about it. So I will first do like example by counterexample, and then we'll actually talk about it. So like Azael has told me he's had several games where people on either side have tweeted him saying, you're biased against my team. It's like, I'm casting TSM versus C9, and the TSM fans say I'm biased against TSM, and the C9 fans say I'm biased against Cloud9. It's like, well, at that point, YOLO, right? I had people in the TL subreddit tell me I am racist because I don't like double lift. And I'm like, okay, definitely not true. So you know, people will prescribe, I think is the word, intent behind actions that they don't like, and they'll be like, oh, you're talking badly about double lift, you're either biased against TL or biased against double lift or literally racist. I'm like, okay, well, none of those three things, but especially not the third one. Yeah. Like, of all things to call me out for, like, I don't mind you saying I'm biased against your team, but let's chill a bit, right? What I will say is, like, I think you should, as a caster, come into a game with an angle. You should have a story that you think is most interesting. Like, hey, I just recently cast Immortals versus Golden Guardians, and the best player on both those teams is by far their junglers. Like, it's not close. It's closer than a Smithy. Like, of course, those are the best two players in that game, not only on those teams. So I'm going to come in talking about the junglers first and foremost, because, hey, these are teams that are doing fairly poorly. Immortals were in last place coming in, still are, but, like, I don't think they're a last place team. And so I'm like, well, if you want to win, it's going to be through Smithy, a lot of it. And on the other side, You know, for Golden Guardians, like you have the second all-team jungle in your team. Like if you're going to be a good team and you're going to go to, you know, maybe 10 wins this split, it's going to be through closer. So I'm coming in saying, hey, I am biased in that I want to talk about the junglers. Like there's 10 players in this game and coaches and other stuff going on, and yet I am choosing to talk about junglers here. You know, when Cloud9's in a game, and back when they were 9-0 or whatever, it's like, well, there's an undefeated team in the LCS as defending champions. They are an exciting story at all times. How good are they? How much can they speed run? You know, look at Blabber popping off the defending MVP. Look, I'm biased. I'm choosing to talk about Blabber here. It's like, well, now, okay, you go farther into the game. You say, okay, well, look, they keep talking about mistakes on TSM, or, you know, they keep talking about how, you know, Doublelift is good, or they keep talking about, you know, Bjergsen, or they keep talking, you know, it's like, look, again, we're trying to pick out the parts that are the most exciting, right? We're trying to be, to the earlier point about being honest in the cast, like, we want to talk about the players that have the best stories. We want to talk about the parts of the gameplay that mean the most. Like, we're not going to talk about the Malphite versus Ornn matchup, because who cares? Like, we're going to ignore that lane for 12 minutes to play TP to the bot lane. We're biased against top laners, I guess, but we're really going to talk about the parts that matter, which is the Kalista versus, you know, Varus lane. So that's what it stems from, right? Is we're going to, as casters, editorialize, because we cannot talk about every cooldown, every champion, every player, every mechanic. We will automatically, forcibly editorialize, and now it might end up that we're not talking about 100 Thieves enough, and that can be a mistake, right? If someday is 6-0 because he solo killed Licorice 4 times, we should be talking about him, and if we're not, that is a mistake, right? Like, we are human, we will get things wrong. There will be a story that we miss out on. You know. For example, I know the player of the game from the last FlyQuest win, because the analyst desk was Wild Turtle. I don't believe either myself or Azael voted Wild Turtle, but the entire analyst desk did. So, like, our different perspectives saw different parts of the game. Now it was hard for us to figure out who was the best player on FlyQuest because it was such a slow grind, and they first blooded Speaker on Invade and then killed him again at level 3 when he went for his own blue buff. It's like, well, this game is always over, so who really stood out? But the AD saw a different version of the game than Azael and I saw, right? I think all three of them voted Turtle, and neither of us did. It's like, well, okay, you could call that bias, I suppose. Like, certainly we had different perspectives on the game, but, like, you know, if you were a really big Turtle fan, and, you know, if you compared how the AD talked about it and how the cast talked about it, you could be like, hey, why are Phreak and Azael biased against Turtle? It's like, well, we just didn't see it. We're human. I like Turtle a lot. I think he's a great dude, you know, but I literally just didn't talk about him, I think, the entire game. And so that's where, like, the idea of bias can come from, is we can't cover all 10 players equally, and we shouldn't, and we will also make mistakes in doing so. I will keep the internal idea in my head that I want to make sure I talk about both teams, and I want to make sure I'm talking about the winning team by the time they're winning. Because, you know, to the earlier point about it's kind of a down to talk about bad teams forever, at a certain point, let's just talk about how 100 Thieves are beating Cloud9. Let's just talk about how FlyQuest are beating TSM. That said, in Fly vs. TSM as an example, TSM was holding on from a deficit. I think 6 times during the game, I was like, TSM are fighting equally from a 7,000 gold deficit. Because I want to be fair to TSM, they are vaguely coming back in the game. Until Soul happened, and then it was over, but it was like they were more or less coming back. So I want to give them the fair shake here, because they are fighting equally. Knowing 80% of the time FlyQuest still closes the game out, but I want to give, you know, that where it's due. And I think so ultimately, yeah, to give the 45-minute answer to the question, that's where the bias comes from, is we have to pick and choose what we talk about, because we can never talk about all players equally.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good explanation. And hopefully, you know, maybe I'll just clip this part.
Maybe.
Anytime someone's
it's
like,
a full-length interview.
Phreak, you're blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Like, no, look, this is, you know, they're
I'm
going
human.
through all of these things. They're human. Maybe they missed it. Yeah. And also, I mean, I think the one other thing to add, I don't think it's bias unless it has like a history. Like, if every single game you're like not talking about one team or one player or whatever, then maybe, you know, it's been 6 games, Phreak, and you haven't said this single, you know, you haven't said Core JJ.
Right. and so, right, and that can be just like screw up and not talking about supports. Like, supports typically aren't very flashy. I will say, like, if a team is bad for a long time, it's like, well, you know, that's gonna make it kind of awkward, right? It's like, well, if I ever talk about the 0 and 8 version of Dignitas, what do you want me to say exactly? Like, so I know, for example, one of the things I did in my dig rant when they pushed mid and lost their base is I said, good job, Frog, and you killed the mid lane. That was, I think that's defensible, to be honest. As a quick stat, this is not me, harping on Froggen. We're talking about being biased. I'm going to go harp on Froggen real quick. Pop quiz. When is the last time Froggen won a playoff best of 5?
Oh God.
And the answer, because everyone who's watching the video can pause and tell me what you think the answer is. The actual answer is 2014 on Alliance when he won the EU LCS. He has not won a best of 5 since then.
Oh, okay.
So Froggen has had a long career of occasionally making playoffs but never getting past quarters. And it's like, look, at a certain point, like I will harp on a player who has not been successful anymore. Because that is a story of you as a career player. For the last 6 years, you've done nothing but maybe get out of groups in the LCS. Or failed to get out of groups in the EU LCS. And it's like, it's just, I don't want to just come out and be negative, but like sometimes that is the player story, right? If I was casting the Phoenix return to the Dignitas, like that game, that was maybe a point I would have brought up at the time. Right. I think I brought that up in the story meeting talking about Phoenix coming in, but I wasn't the caster on that game, and I don't think they chose to use that piece of information. But it's like, hey, that's relevant, right? If you want to be a winning organization, Froggen has not done this for anyone in 6 years. So Phoenix is a good choice. Phoenix has actually won a couple series. He's been really good. Like there are higher high points for him. That can be relevant. But yeah, I know Froggen has a lot of fans, and if you haven't won anything in 6 years, there's going to be a lot of, well, Froggen has screwed up in the storylines, even when being honest about the game, and that can come across as being biased as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Wow, I had not realized it had been that long. I was thinking 2016, 2017. Which one's the safer answer? But
yeah. No, neither.
So, what do you think this region needs as far as growing more? Like, do you think critiquing on the broadcast is helpful? Because maybe people are like, like we're getting called out, like we must be better, or what other things do you think that we need to grow?
So it's interesting. So I'll answer the broadcast one really quickly. I think there's pros and cons. I know that I have actually coached myself into, and I think wrongly so, an idea of like anytime I'm playing an important match, like imagining there's a spectator watching, and it's like, what do they think about how I'm playing right now? Like how stupid am I going to look if I die right here? And I don't think it's really correct. I think you should play the game well. But I do know, like I have seen and heard from players who say, "Oh yeah, I got criticized about this so much that I stopped doing it." Like people not buying Morellonomicon when you're against Soraka or Yumi. It's like, just the community hates Morello so much. Thanks LS, and some of it's valid. Don't get me wrong. People were overbuying it, and that is fair. But like at no point were players doing the actual item analysis. They were just like, I buy Morello's. And then people were like, wait, Morello's is bad. Okay, I don't buy Morello's. And it's like, no. That game, you should have bought Morello's. And the right answer is, well, you should have an analyst or do it yourself and figure it out. Not all teams have that. Unlucky. So, the broad swaths of overcorrection, at least tend to like trend positively at the very least. But yeah, stop at Oblivion Orb and go buy real items. 80% of the time is the correct build path. I wish more teams would just have analysts to do build paths, but whatever. That's like a little rabbit hole to dive down. But yeah, it's like, hey, teams aren't picking up unique champions fast enough, or whatever. A random quick anecdote about like picking up champions quickly enough. When Worlds was an NA in 2016, I think, or 17, around then, whenever it was an NA, I know Someday or Smeb, wanted to pick up Kled because they faced Zig in solo queue, and Zig's Kled was so good. But it wasn't ready. Like, he's like, I tried to practice it, but it wasn't ready in time for a World, so I didn't bring it out. But like NA solo queue taught a top tier Korean top laner to play Kled, which is cool. Shout out to Zig for that one.
Nice.
So in not all cases are players like ready to bring out the pick. So when Mark Z is harping on Wukong and we're like, hey, is Volibear getting picked or not? Or our team's playing the right champions? Like, look, sometimes they're practicing it, but it's not ready yet in scrims, and that's always a lot of it, right? Is there's always 10 times as many games behind the scenes as there are in front of the camera. And so there's all kinds of stuff going on that people don't know about, whether champions are ready or not, or who knows. As far as how does the region get better, I know NA has a smaller player base than EU, than Korea, than China. Like of the 4 major regions, North America has the smallest native player base. Now maybe there are also cultural factors around how hard people want to work. how like obedient people are to authority, in terms of like listening to a coach. Like a lot of Americans aren't wearing masks, and hey, COVID's back, yay!
Yeah.
And like there seems to be, generally speaking, like very broadly, like cultural causes for this. To speak very far outside my area of expertise, this tends to be true from what I've seen, and maybe that's wrong, and I'm sorry if I am.
Yeah.
But that to me, either way, like there can be cultural impacts to things like this, right? Which can be relevant to being a pro player. Player base though is definitely relevant, right? There is a reason that like North America has imported so many mid laners. Is like the 10th best mid laner in North America is like a mediocre academy mid. It's like, yeah, that player is going to look really bad on the LCS stage. Like that's just true. And so, yeah, right, where like players are getting imported. Like Bjergsen comes over, and now he's got a green card, so now he's a non-import. Though obviously he's Danish born. Jensen, has played long enough to believe that he's in the same boat, where like he's a non-import, and so he counts as a resident mid laner. And like there are 2 best mid laners in the league, right? And that's in them living in America full time, playing NA solo queue, right? It's not like, oh, solo queue makes NA mids bad. It's like, well, Bjergsen and Jensen are still the very best. They might go home in December to Denmark and hang with their family and maybe play solo queue, but probably it's to unwind. Like they are practicing in NA full time for, in Bjergsen's case, 6 years, and he's still top 2. It's like, well, maybe it's not NA solo queue is the problem, because Bjergsen is literally still better than all of you. Maybe it's Bjergsen works harder than all of you. Or something, right? I don't know what it is exactly. You can ask Bjergsen why he's, still at the very top, but like the imports remain on top, and it's not because they go home and play Korean solo queue for 2 weeks and then, hyperbolic time team back to the very top end, right? That's not how that works, I don't think. So I'm not sure what needs to change. Again, player base is smaller, which means, you're top of top of top, 8 standard deviations above the mean players. Well, there's 2 of them instead of 20 of them because your player base isn't as large. Like that's just math. That's just statistics. So at a certain point, that is true. It is easier for larger regions to get better players just because there's more of them. That's just going to happen. Jat has turned a 9th place team to a 1st place team. Maybe you just need to hire more casters as coaches. Bring out Azale and Kobe next, and we're going to hire a whole new round of color casters. Who knows? But I don't know what it is exactly, right? Like that is not my area of expertise. I'm just like throwing darts at a wall. It's like me being a Redditor telling teams how to draft. It's like, well, I'm functionally gold, and no, like I'm not useful here. And honestly, at the end of the day, like I'm not useful here either in terms of diagnosing what to do better. I can point out things that are true, but it doesn't mean I have the answers.
Yeah, I think as far as the item point that you made, I've actually talked to 3 or 4 different teams in the last 2 weeks about like, hey, why did you make these item choices? Like with this draft, the item choices don't seem like they add up. Like, are you talking about, hey, should I go solo queue Olaf here or full tank Olaf here, or for the same for Jarvan or like whatever? And there's like, oh no, not really. It's like, why? If this is your only potential tank and then you don't go tank, your team should probably know that you're not going to. Like, was it discussed before? No, not really. And so that's like the one thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned like maybe they should have an analyst for item build paths. I agree. Because I think
Sure. I mean, that's true. I know a couple teams did. I know when Sneaky was playing on Cloud9, I remember talking with him in the studio a couple of times, and he had said that they have an analyst that does builds. Like he says he has an analyst that like gives him build recommendations for him to go try out in solo queue. Like, hey, try this out on Kalista. I think it's the best build. I want to say he was on TL for a while. I think his tag is Surza. I follow him on Twitter. He's coaching a minor region team right now, I believe. But I know he's still around. Like that dude has done a ton of math on like item builds and breakpoints and whatnot. And so like I know that guy can easily like send people to stuff. But yeah, I don't think all teams have like someone just doing, basic, 9th grade math to just like figure out item build stuff. Which yeah, it is fairly low hanging fruit and fairly easy to integrate. I also don't think it's that huge of a deal. Like, to your point about Olaf, right? It's like, well, even full tank Olaf is not going to be that much more of a front line than default Olaf, where he's going, warrior into Black Cleaver, because, well, he's still Olaf. He turns his own armor MR off when he ults, and the guy's not going stone plate, and he's not going aftershock. He literally can't. It's actually, I think the game actually forces you off because you can't apply hard CC, right? Like, you are never going to get Cinder Hulk Olaf anywhere near Sejuani in tankiness, or Nautilus with Stoneplate, or top lane Orin, right? So to a certain point, yes, that should probably be discussed in the ideal world. At the same time, the player instincts of, well, I know what Olaf does, he's not really ever a great frontline, is also true. So it's not that big of a deal. I will say that there's something to the fact that pros do a lot of things on feel, because, well, this player has played 237 Zoe games, and I'm going to guess that when the guy's like, this feels like an Oblivion Orb game, he's probably right without someone doing the math and saying, okay, listen, Jensen, when there's 3 Merc Treads in the game, you skip Oblivion Orb. Like, that's the breakdown of the math, which, by the way, is also not directly supported in math. That's going to be a feel thing, because, well, what target are you hitting? How much MR do they have? How much stat shards do they have? Will this guy buy another MR item? He's going to go Banshee second. Is the Abyss Mask coming in? Like itemization in League is so damn complex. Like, I tried, for example, to try to build out Oblivion Orb versus Haunting Guys versus Leandries versus Morellos versus Void Staff versus Deathcap. And so what I did is I took the top 5 picked champions in each role and said, how many deal magic damage? Okay, so of these, like, 12 champions, these are 12 most picked magic damage champions in Pro. Here are their AP ratios per ability. Okay, I'm going to find out, like, about when do people pick a second item. Okay, it's about level 11. Okay, so I'm going to pick a level 11 version of all these champions. Here's their ability order. Okay, so Q maxed, E is 2 points, R is 2 points, W is at 1 point. That's going to hit every ability. Okay, but how long is the fight? Like, how many Spiderlings are attacking for Elise right now? Because Elise's Spiderling ratios are absurdly high, and her spell ratios are absurdly low. So who knows? Is she fighting slow? Is she fighting fast? Are the fights long? Are they short? Who knows? Okay, but based on how the duration is, those are her AP ratios. Here's Syndra. How many orbs? I don't know. Let's guess 5. Okay, here's Syndra with 5 orbs. And here's LeBlanc. Is she landing Empowered Chain or Empowered W? Because that changes the AP ratios. Okay, well, all right. Well, I have like all these 70 factors built out. Okay, great. Now, here's all the items. Are you wave clearing? Are you hitting champions? What champion you're hitting? Here's the magic resist chart. And it's like, okay, I can pick you out when you're Elise fighting for 5 seconds against 112 MR. I can tell you your best item. Ask, Xmithy, if he's going to track the MR of every champion in the game and guess how long the fights are going to be.
Yeah.
3 levels in advance, we can start his build path. Like, that's not realistic, right? And if you want to do the math really well, that's the tip of the iceberg. It keeps going. I stopped talking about it. So at a certain point, like, you really can't solve this. And at a certain point, you're in base for 5 seconds waiting to region. Are you buying Oblivion Orb or you're buying an NLR? You got to choose now, and you don't have time to like, oh, the Orange and Fog. What MR does he have? I don't know. Press tab. What did he buy? Abyssal Mask? That's like 137? Okay, like, you don't have time for that. You just can't. So at a certain point, players have to play on feel. And yes, instill good habits, right? Instill the habit to say, look, buy Executioner's first item when you're landing against Soraka or Yuumi or Vladimir, right? Just do that right away. All of the tanks now buy a Bramble Vest first item against all the really annoying, harassing top lane champions like Lucian and Vayne and Jace and whatnot. There's like, yeah, it's just true, that's really good. And some of that is supported by math. Some that's like, just learn to buy Bramble Vest and then build your items. And ultimately, like, that's what's useful. At the end of the day, you can look at any pro in any top level situation across any game and be like, ooh, there's a microcosm here that you did wrong. And it's like, yeah, but the other 99% of things they did right are why they're the best top laner in the world or the best opper in the world or whatever, right? And so, yes, things can always be improved. These players are never perfect, but man, and a lot of times it really is a molehill. Outside of just like really obvious things like just buy Executioners and, don't finish Morellos when they have literally no healing on the team. Like, there's some easy ones to be like, hey, just fix that. But there are also optimizations that are really, really tough. On the other side, as one final point, there are other broad swaths that are huge, huge mistakes that people aren't seeing. So like Lethality Varus was the best Varus for a very long time. People figured it out and finally started playing it. But Lethality Varus was the best Varus for a long time. Back in 2017-ish, when people were only playing like Kog'Maw and Varus and other Blade of the Ruin King and Rageblade carries, solo queue win rate data told us by far Rageblade first was substantially better. Like 3% win rate, like absurdly better. This is just like a stronger item by far. And people didn't realize for a while. And I remember like asking pro AD carries, like, hey, why aren't you rushing Rageblade first item? He's like, oh, I really feel like I need to sustain in lane. In 2 months, that wasn't true anymore. People just all rushed Rageblade because it was just better. They figured out how to deal with having less sustain because it was a weaker build to go Ruin King first. So sometimes there are like really, really broad swaths where people are missing out on parts of the meta. Ashe has been the second highest winner AD carry for like the last 6 months. And she has been the number 5 AD carry in pro play forever, and now she's number 1.
Hmm.
And it's like, yes, Aphelios and Callista and Co got nerfed, but Ashe was also just ready the whole time. You probably could have been picking Ashe. She was that good. That was champ select power left on the table. There were plenty of games where it's like, oh, we didn't engage. Crap, what do we pick? Oh, Ashe is viable, but no one was playing her yet. So there are things, but they're usually really broad things that are left on the table. Like Ashe is pickable. Don't finish Morellos without healing. Buy executions or Bramble Vest in the early game. Usually it's not like, well, based on my math here, we should really go Lord Dominic's over Phantom Dancer. That's usually not the big problem.
Mm-hmm. I did actually want to even bring up the big comparison you did. I didn't realize you went that far into it, but especially like when
Spent
LS
a few days
was,
on it.
when LS was under fire and then he was firing back and you were like, all right, guys, here's the math. That was really cool.
Yeah.
I know you do a lot of that on the Phreak show as well.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we're like going over time here.
That's okay. I'm having fun.
Okay, thank you. Well, then talk about the Phreak show then. Like, what is your how are you so excited about the math? I don't know. There's like a better way to phrase that question.
No. That's exactly the way to phrase it. I think you're on the nose. For whatever reason, I really enjoy pretty much all branches of math up until about calculus. I did okay at calculus in school. And that was part of my schooling. I started as computer engineering, then I went into economics. And to finish an economics bent, you do, a moderate amount of low-level calculus.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I really like generic like algebra, geometry stuff. I really like probability and statistics. I think those are really fun. Those are my favorite courses in school. It's a thing I really enjoy. It just is what it is. I don't know exactly why, but it's kind of fun to find vaguely objective truths about things. Because then I know I'm making the right choices, right? Like I want to excel, I want to do well, and so if I can prove that this is literally always correct, it's like great. I can just do the correct thing and feel good about it, and now I don't have to make that decision anymore. I've done the work. So yeah, that's really nice to do. I just really enjoy it, and not a lot of people do like diving into the math. Not a lot of people have the time to dive into the math. I do, and so one of the other things that I really enjoy is kind of helping, informing, teaching people. I like being the expert. I'm not always the smartest person in the room, and I'll try to sit back when I'm not, which is frequent. But like at least in the math discussions, like I've at least done the math that even if people can do the math better, mine's at least close enough to accurate that I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of stuff is just so easy. It's like, well, x plus y equals 3. So here you go. It's 3. You're done. That's a line graph. It goes like that. At least on my side, I know it gets mirrored on the other side. Either way, moving on. It's just enjoyable. I like breaking things down. It's especially nice when it's complicated and hard to break down. It's like one level removed from just like, oh, well, they buffed Q damage by 5, so it's 5 more damage. Got it. We're good. Like that's not hard. But breaking down, XP differences and all kinds of stuff like that. That's it takes more time. But it's like, okay, cool. I can synthesize this into something that is digestible for someone else. I'm providing like direct value. That's good. I really enjoy that. So one of the difficulties that I try to balance correctly, and I don't think I'm doing it quite right yet with something like Phreak Show, is the right amount of deep diving into, okay, let's show you a whole bunch of graphs and charts and whatnot versus let's make it digestible. In my mind, the audience for Phreak Show is fairly casual. It's like, look, just catch me up with the patch notes. Like, what's good this patch? And it's aimed at pro specifically. It's not aimed because by definition, it comes out a week and a half late for solo queue. So it's not that useful for solo queue. If you wanted to find out what's good in solo queue, like there's sites that do that for you. So it's like, okay, I'm an LCS viewer or an LEC viewer, and it's like, hey, what? I'm not really playing League very much anymore. I'm not really watching patch notes or anything. I just I'm a fan of the sport. I want to watch the sport. Like, cool. Let me catch you up. And so that tends to be a fairly casual audience. Which I know, being me, like I know a lot of my audience also overlaps with like the hardcore math nerds who like want to know the nitty gritty. Yeah. But I still feel like that show is positioned on the other extreme in a certain case, and so I will show numbers when it's there because it's easy to look at. It's more than just talking head, which is a positive. But in a lot of cases, I don't want to do hard dives into stuff. Mm-hmm. I just want to synthesize as much as possible and say, look, just here's the answer, right? Here's X. I've solved for X. Here you go. Hands off. The farther you go into something, the more complicated it gets. Like as we talked about with item math before, like when you're an expert on something, the answer is almost always it's complicated. Like that's the actual final answer is it's complicated. And so you've got to do either a lot of really, really intelligent paring down, or be only moderately knowledgeable to say the answer is X. And I'm not saying I'm one or the other. You can have your own opinion on that one. But I think the goal with Phreak Show is to say, here's X, and just leave out the it's complicated part. And what's nice, though, for that is a lot of the times the designers, I would say 80% of the balance changes, actually probably 90% of the balance changes they do, are meant to be like, this is an easy 1% win rate drop. We're done. Like, I'm going to nerf your Q by 5 damage. We're out. Like, they're not going to do any reshapes. They're not going to do the bigger changes. A lot of times either because they can get it wrong because it's complicated. They're like, I'm going to buff the Q and nerf the W, buff the base stats and lower the mana regen. And it's like, I think this is a nerf. And they'll just be like, look, this is supposed to take me an hour worth of effort. I put in some numbers. We double check it with QA. We double check with playtest team that this is the right size. Okay, cool. We shift the balance change. And they're doing other things with their time, which is like, I think, totally reasonable and a fine way to do things. And it means that the balance changes are like, well, they strictly buffed Karthus across these 5 vectors. Karthus is stronger. They nerfed jungle damage. Probably still better in jungle too.
Yeah. I really want to see your thoughts on the Skarner changes, but I know that one is very interesting because that one they actually changed the total AD to bonus AD, and then they throw in AP and the bases
and those are my favorites. Those are my favorites kind of changes because it's like, oh great, like I will happily like synthesize this into something more digestible. I will try to synthesize it down to what, okay, well here's the part where it's complicated, and then I'll give you my opinion on the it's complicated part. Like, and that's like what I do on my patch rundowns that are going to run even longer than this interview. About an hour per patch notes, and it's like, okay, I will break it down to the part where I don't feel comfortable breaking it down or oversimplifying anymore, and then I will give you what I think my TLDR is. Then we'll see if I'm right. Frequently wrong, sometimes I'm correct. Whatever. But yeah, I really enjoy the changes. Those are really fun. Across all games that I play, I love patch notes. Like I genuinely enjoy reading patch notes. I'm like, what's new this time? What do I see?
Yeah. No, I actually used to watch all of those, and I was going to ask because I haven't for a couple months. You're still doing those though? The hour and a half long rundowns.
It depends. Some of them are under like 45 minutes if they're really straightforward. Almost always there is something that I'll find myself wanting to rant about because in my spare time, I like to believe I can be a game designer. If I wanted to actually do it, I would spend the time like building things out in like Unreal or StarCraft 2 map editor or whatever. Like there's actually a lot of tools out there that aren't that hard to get into, and I don't. So who am I really? But I at least enjoy diving into like the mechanics of how League of Legends interacts, and it's like, okay, if I was gonna remake all champions base stats, how would I do? And like that's just like an interesting like mental experiment, more so than like actually trying to practice game design shops.
Yeah. So you may have just given me my answer for the last question that I had, but that would be if you could enter a hyperbolic time chamber, and just learn a new skill. Or increase a skill that you already have to like an incredible level. What would it be?
So a couple options, I suppose. Number one is I really, really, really like casting. I don't want to quit casting anytime soon. So if I could just be like a better caster, like that's more useful to me and more fun to me as well. So it just automatically wins than like another skill like being a game designer or an artist or whatever. Like I'm not looking to change career path anytime soon. I really like what I'm doing. The other side of it though would be something that wouldn't be career focused. Would be like, oh, if I could just like be a better League of Legends player, like if I could be challenged, that'd be great. Like if I could just be challenger or Radiant and Valorant, whatever, because I'm I'm decent enough at LOR to hit master. Then yeah, okay, maybe that one, right? If I'm like happy enough with my skill level at casting, I could just like be an expert League player, then okay, maybe that one. I mean, it would feed back into casting, because then I could be like, I could tell you I'm right because I'm challenger. I'm 800 LP. I'm higher than Turtle. I'm not, but but that was the game I played way back in 2014. Was casting Challenger Series with Zyrene. Is how many players am I higher elo than right now? And it was usually about 1 per game.
That's fun.
But yeah, whatever. I mean, it's a random aside. So yeah, I mean, honestly, it's like League or it's like League or the game I'm casting, which is League, basically.
That's very fair. Dude, were you saying you're masters in Valorant?
No, Masters in LOR. I am Diamond. Diamond in Valorant.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's rather impressive. What about your TFT? You got to bring it up.
So I have not been engaging with TFT much. I hit Diamond 1 in Season 1 in the first set. And then by the time Set 2 came around, we got to have a lot of access to internal testing on LOR. And so I hopped the heck over because the new shiny game. I had over 1,500 games of LOR by the time the game launched.
Wow.
Like I had played a lot of that game.
Man.
A lot of them were AI games because I was playing at like 2 in the morning over like Thanksgiving break at like the in-laws. It's like nothing else I'm doing. I'm just gonna play some bots and like play more Hecarim.
That's so fun.
Yeah, so it's like I hyper engaged in LOR for a really long time. I played a bunch of Valorant during its like internal as well. So it's like yeah. Anyway, I'm like a hardcore Riot gamer. Like they've made games exclusively in genres that I really enjoy. It's great.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for the rest of them as well. But
yeah, me too.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the interview. I appreciate the insight.
Thanks.
I appreciate the critique on the cast and everything else, all the hype. It's been really fun.
Thanks.
It's been a fun summer.
It has been. It's been really good.
But yeah, anything you want to say to all the fans or the Reddit haters out there in the world before we head off?
You're allowed to be a Reddit hater. That's fine. The one thing I wish people would do better with negative feedback, and it's people venting frustration more than actual feedback, but it's like, don't take an action and then presume like the intent behind it. I know this is like going back to people calling me racist very slightly, just like that irks me really badly. Like, I less mind you calling me biased against the team, but like, look, just say that you didn't like the way I talked about TL. Like say what you felt legitimately, right? Not, I hate how Phreak is biased. Say like, hey, I think Phreak wasn't fair to TL this game. I would love to read that feedback legitimately, right? Please, right? Like, I would be happy to have you tell me like what negative feelings you got out of that game and what it was that set you off. Go for it. Like, I will read that gladly and be like, oh, good to know. Like, I'm upsetting TL fans. And I will take a second and think like, because otherwise if you're like, Phreak hates TL, I'll be like, okay, first of all, no. Second of all, okay, I'm upsetting TL fans. Why? Right? And it's just like, you're adding barriers between me and making the cast better for you. Like, I legitimately want you to enjoy the cast. I want you to enjoy the games. If you tell me what you don't enjoy, that makes it easier for me to then retro that part of it. Mm-hmm. So, a thought for you.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Give specifics when you're criticizing. Don't just attack a person blindly.
Yeah. You don't have to suggest how to fix it. I can do that as well. But if you want to, you can. I will often skip it, but that's fine.
Yeah, but much more helpful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again so much, Phreak. And for all of you watching, thank you guys. There's a bunch more content on our channel. And go check out The Phreak Show and the patch rundowns if you're into more of the nitty-gritty math. Sure. But yeah, thanks again so much, and we will catch you all next time.